Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Well, good morning from my end. Thank you very much for joining. Reason I say good morning, my name's Shane, and I'm presenting from Melbourne, Australia. As you can see, it's early morning here at 6 a.m. But very excited to be here and talk about today's topic, which is SAP compliance and audit readiness. I will talk about Rev-Trac in a short moment, but I just want to start off by, like I said, welcoming everyone and mentioning that, this webinar being hosted on Microsoft Teams, one of the first times we've done this at Rev-Trac on this platform. So a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We do have the chat and the Q&A functions. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A function. Be happy to answer those hopefully at the end of the session. But maybe as a nice little intro in the chat, if you'd like to share where you're joining from, where in the United States or somewhere else around the Americas, or even the early risers in Australia, it'd be nice to know where everyone's joining from and where we can where we can welcome you from. So as that's happening, let me get straight into it and let me give a bit of an overview on who Rev-Trac are for those who are unfamiliar. I'm not sure on this call whether the spread is between customers or those new to Rev-Trac, but might take the time to briefly mention who Rev-Trac are and who I am, of course, before we get started. So like I said, my name's Shane Kennedy. I'm the Product Enablement Specialist here at Rev-Trac. Rev-Trac was founded in 1997. The year 2027, I know you might cause some alerts on people's minds, but 2027 is our 30-year anniversary. So we're very excited. We've been in business for 30 years. In 2027, we're going to be continuing to deliver change for some of the world's largest organizations. So in our 28 years of business so far, we've grown to over 60,000 users and 250 of the world's most complex and largest SAP using organizations. We are an SAP software partner, and as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we're certified in a bunch of different areas, very important in the modern landscape. And of our 60,000 users, as you can see, through our G2 reviews at the top, we are loved, which is fantastic. And if you'd like to hear from some of our wide variety of customers and the stories that they tell, you can either head to G2 or to the SAP store in the bottom left-hand corner to see 49 reviews. So like I said, I'm joining from Melbourne, Australia. That's where the Rev-Trac head office is. That's where we were founded. And pleasure to be joining you. And I'd like to thank everyone for being on this call. And I might just quickly jump into the chat and say hello to the team, Dan from Philadelphia, Lewis from the Netherlands, Daniel from Sweden. Fantastic. So we've got some European folks here. Pleasure to meet you, and hopefully you find a lot of value in this webinar. So let's get started. So running through a quick agenda before we get into it. In this webinar, we are going to be talking about compliance and how we can ensure that we are compliant in our SAP operations, particularly in change management, and how we can get ready for audits and how we can do the work early so that we meet audit requirements when that time does come, both externally and internally. We are going to be talking about some of the challenges of the modern SAP landscape in terms of digital transformations or complexities in terms of just the way that businesses operate and the implications that has on compliance requirements. And we're going to talk about some solutions, how we can how you can make that an easier prospect. So giving away the answer here, it's automation and governance, but we'll get to that. We are also going to be showing some demos during this webinar, which I'm very excited about, and I'm sure you are too. Like I said, I know there might be some existing Rev-Trac customers on here, so we are going to just run through quickly how Rev-Trac can enforce some processes and how we can help organizations stay compliant and audit ready, as well as using some new integrations that we're continuing to work on, such as our integration with ServiceNow. An example we're going to be showing is how we can enforce segregation of duties from a tooling perspective. And we're also going to be showing a demonstration between Rev-Trac and Cloud ALM, firstly being how we can conduct what we call information centralization, but then also segregation of duties, again, from a role perspective. So hang on till the end of this webinar. I'm hoping we have time for these demos and we can go through them in depth. And yeah, it's going to be very exciting. We're going to be going through a lot, and hopefully you'll find value. So like I said, if you have questions, please use them in the Q&A, and we will get to them at the end of the session. So let's get into it. Let's talk about SAP compliance. Now, firstly, the reason it's so important, I don't think I have to explain it in too much detail. We're all SAP folks. We all know that SAP environments are mission critical. You know, for these large organizations, they run finance, they run supply chain, they run HR, they run these very important business departments and functions. So that means, you know, for good reason, they are under constant scrutiny from both internal governance teams and external regulators. And when we talk about, you know, compliance and regulations, we are talking things like SOX, FDA 21 CFR Part 11, something that I've memorized for our team members, for our folks in the States, and GDPR for our European friends, and as well as internal IT policies as well. So all of these things have to be kept in mind when we are delivering change to the organization in SAP systems because of both these external and internal requirements. When it comes to audits, and depending on the size or the type of the organizations, audits can be frequent. I'll start with the negative. They can be disruptive, of course. You know, in a change management context, auditors do want to know a lot. They want to know from a change management perspective, who made the change, why was it made, was it tested, was it appropriately approved, and did it follow the correct path to production? And if your organization, you know, if these answers to these questions, you know, live in spreadsheets and emails or disconnected systems, then, you know, you're in trouble. IT teams often get pulled, you know, from their day jobs, you know, the things that keep the business running, to conduct these audits, which can be disruptive, particularly if they're, you know, having to dig through logs and, you know, reconstruct change histories and the like. But, you know, it's not all bad. You know, compliance and, you know, auditing does ensure you know, proper business continuity. It ensures proper data and risk mitigation. If you have, you know, these things in check, then you can operate at the speed of business. Like, I like to think of compliance like the brakes on a car. So, you know, it doesn't just slow you down; it lets you go faster with confidence. But those brakes have to be, you know, reliable, automated, and built into the system. So, I mentioned the negative, you know, it can be a bit of a headache, but it also is very important. So, like I said, if this is being done manually, it is a problem, but hopefully in this webinar today, we are going to address or suggest some solutions for audit-ready SAP environments that don't compromise agility. Let's talk now about some examples of some compliance requirements. And again, this is, you know, from different teams around the world. You might be required to have, you know, to abide by these different compliance regulations from an external perspective, but then also internally, your organization might set some policies to align with, you know, best practices, or, you know, from a security perspective or a risk perspective. Let's just go through some of the examples. So the first being one of the most common and one of the most frequently asked questions that we receive is segregation of duties. So in a change management context, separation of duties essentially means that the people who develop or approve changes are not the same people who push them into production. If there's a way to enforce controlled workflows, that's fantastic. But if not, and if there's a violation of segregation of duties, then it's pretty important to raise that. But if we can avoid it, even better. So it's important to regularly review transport activity logs and change authorizations, particularly if you want to, you know, prevent, you know, those unauthorized changes slipping into production, which of course can, you know, cause downgrades potentially, but we'll get to that in a few moments. So first, segregation of duties. Next being change documentation traceability. Traceability is something that we think is very important here at Rev-Trac. As I'm sure you all know, every single SAP change, whether it be custom code, config updates, OSS notes, security role adjustments, they all should have audit-ready documentation, which includes, like I've mentioned, you know, who requested it, why did they request it, who approved it, and when and how was it deployed. That clear end-to-end traceability is very important across, you know, across the tools. If there's a way to centralize it, even better. But it does have to be that full traceability from business requirement to the technical change to the testing and evidence of those results, and then of course the deployment as well. So if that is done well and is done, you know, in the BAU from a day-to-day perspective, this does ensure that you know, regulators and auditors can it makes their lives easier. They can, verify that the change did follow a controlled and approved process. Quickly on testing, of course, testing is important from a functional perspective, but also to ensure that changes that are made do still comply with, say, for example, compliance requirements. For example, for Sarbanes-Oxley, ensuring that financial reporting is accurate. For GDPR, ensuring that we're abiding by data handling requirements. So testing should also include the impact from a compliance perspective and ensure that those checkpoints are in place. A lot of these are handled by third-party tools, such as Tricentis' suite of tools, or other security tools or impact assessment tools out there as well. That's an example of a way to meet those requirements. However, it does make it a bit more difficult from an audit perspective if the tools aren't integrated. So, lastly, continuous monitoring. It is important to make sure that you are keeping an eye on these and ensuring that say for example, if there are emergency changes, then you're ensuring that there's continuous improvement, there's continuous monitoring, and that audit trail is kept from a day-to-day basis, and you're ensured that you are meeting the requirements of the audit and compliance teams. So all of these requirements come together to balance business agility with meeting those requirements needs, which is important so that you don't introduce risk or breach any laws. So there's some examples of some compliance requirements. Different industries have to abide by these, but let's talk about where it can get challenging. So in SAP, a lot of organizations, for whatever reason, are going to have complex environments. And I'll go through some of these and explain where it can be challenging. First of all, one that's a hot topic with us is what we call N+1, N+2. This is where you have your support track or your BAU track and some project tracks. This is a common occurrence for S4 transformations and the like. But from a compliance and audit perspective, what are the compliance requirements for these project landscapes while they're getting built? Is everything that's happening being documented appropriately for auditors? That can be a question. How does the organization do that? Global templates is another one that we work with a lot. If there are changes being pushed from a headquarters to some different regions across the world, how are you ensuring that you're abiding by the local regulations for those different regions across the world? Because there are different requirements based on geographic location. Cross-landscape distribution. This shows the importance of keeping data accurate. So how can you show your compliance team that you can guarantee that? This is some of the challenges that we're seeing amongst organizations. 5-tier landscapes where it's not just dev, quas, prod. There are additional staging or pre-production or performance testing environments. What's the approval process here, and what level of information and reporting is required for each of these systems? It's got to be consistent. A couple more, for example, conditional systems where we have, let's say, selective performance testing. Firstly, what changes go through these systems and when are they required, why are they required, and also who can approve the migration. Even, for example, for system outages, who can approve that the bypassing of that system can occur. These are all things that need to be planned for. They need to be done compliantly, and they need to compliantly, not sure if that's a word, and in an audit-friendly way, so all documented. And lastly, as an example, we also have air gaps. Not sure if there are any government or military customers on here, but you do have to have a plan and be compliant there. So not only are some of these environments, a challenge, some of these, complex scenarios of, systems and landscapes can be a challenge, but also the different tooling within an organization. So yes, they have a lot of different and complex environments, but also a lot of tools in their tech stack for a lot of different reasons. It might be an ITSM tool, it might be a testing tool, it might be an impact assessment tool, it might be a security code scanning tool, it might be a documentation tool. If all of these tools are being used for whatever reason, are they being used? Like we don't want to have shelfware. Can these? Is it possible to bypass these tools? That's bad. And what about all the information and all the logs within these tools? You want to make sure that you don't want to make sure. It is imperative that you are collating and logging all of these all of the information from these tools in a way that is going to be, when it comes time to audit, it's going to be easy to collate all of that information. So we've gone through some of the challenges. What about the costs of non-compliant or audit failure. It does look like this graph just says the cost is going to increase, but let me explain. The first example of where it can go wrong and the costs associated with that, one thing that we are very wary of at Rev-Trac and one thing we try to avoid is unplanned downtime. So in SAP environments, unauthorized changes can destabilize production, which of course, can cost, depending on the organization, it can cost millions in that halt in business continuity. That is an issue. Audit failure, if auditors can't trace changes or verify approvals or confirm segregation of duties, your organization could face fines. It could be reputational damage or even legal consequences, especially, in regulated industries like pharmaceuticals or in finance. Secondly is, manual audit preparation, it can be considered a hidden cost because, IT teams can, spend days or weeks sifting through emails and spreadsheets and logs to reconstruct these change histories, which does come at a massive cost for the organization. If, pull skilled staff away from their actual strategic work, that can be a cost for the business as well. From a trust perspective, if business leaders lose trust in SAP data or if auditors, question governance, agility can suffer and teams can fall into firefighting mode. So, they're constantly chasing issues instead of preventing them. And lastly, just briefly, in high regulated industries, the stakes are even higher, of course. A single compliance gap can trigger investigations, it can halt operations, or it can block product releases as well. So automation here and traceability, they're not just nice to haves, they're essential to avoid some of these costs for non-compliance and audit failure. So not just from an operational or a financial perspective, it can be reputational and strategic as well. So to avoid these costs, what do compliance and audit teams want? That is the first question. My heading here is sort of gone a bit awry, but apologies for that. Let's quickly go through what compliance and audit teams want here. So accurate information first and foremost. It is super important that the information that is being collated is accurate. So avoiding, manual duplicating between systems or the handover, that manual effort can introduce errors or inconsistencies. So you want to eliminate that for the audit team. They want an automated and enforced change process. Manual workflows aren't only inefficient, but they're also very risky. They love an automated process because it ensures that every single change follows the right path. We're not having to rely on SOPs or anything like that. That reduces the chance of non-compliant activity, so very important there. We're also looking for verifiable audit evidence. That means a documented history of every single SAP change. Again, who made it? Why did they make it? When did they make it? How was it approved? If you can find a tool that captures all of this automatically, fantastic. Fourth, they want an efficient process that supports audit and compliance requirements without disrupting operations. And finally, a single source of truth. When change is scattered across different tools and spreadsheets, it can be, like I said, a massive task to collate all of that. Imagine everything consolidated into one platform. That's the dream. So that's from a compliance and audit team perspective. What about the SAP team? And we'll get into how some of these are solved shortly. But quickly mentioning that they too want enforced and pre-configured workflows. When they create a change, they don't want to have to be, going to documentation, or they don't want to be reminding themselves of how it's got to progress to production in a compliant and auditable way. If that's automated, that's less for them to worry about. They also want to automate that change lifecycle with dynamic and role-based approvals and steps. So they want to, ideally, if there was a way to automate, the workflow from start to finish, ensuring that every single change follows, the correct sequence of approvals and testing and documentation. That's the dream. We might get to how we can see this in practice shortly. They also want to ensure that, from their perspective, that every single change is traceable. A complete audit trail is not only good for the auditing team, also good for the SAP team from a improvement perspective. That continuous monitoring, that visibility is important for internal governance and external audits as well. Eliminate undocumented workarounds and uncontrolled workarounds. We talk about the cowboy developers or the rogue transports. Yes, the SAP team from the management team down to the analysts, they do want to ensure that that is eliminated as well, because of course it can lead to errors further down the line, particularly unplanned downtime, which we all want to avoid. And lastly, centralized change across ABAP and non-ABAP systems with all these different technologies and these emerging technologies like the BTP and from Java to C++ or any of those other technologies. A centralized change process makes things a lot easier as well. So let's take a quick moment to explore what we've covered so far. We've talked about what compliance is, why it matters. We've also talked about how it can be a challenge and the impact if things go wrong, and what compliance teams and audit teams ideally can have. Now, you might be thinking, well, giving away the secret here, it is Rev-Trac. Rev-Trac is a way to make all of this possible. But I think some of the reasons why that is so much the case is twofold: is automation, number one, and governance being built in. So with Rev-Trac, every single SAP change must follow a pre-configured workflow. That means no shortcuts, no undocumented changes or tweaks, and no, like I said, no cowboy developers or rogue transports. So I'm going to get into some demos in the moment to show, for example, how every single transport is tied to a Rev-Trac request, how we can collate all of the documentation automatically, every single approval and every single action is documented in a workflow. That is the secret sauce. So let's talk about how that is done in a short moment. So essentially with Rev-Trac, the key points are that you can define the journey. When we install Rev-Trac, you do a configuration engagement with our consulting team where you set the processes and we can map them to your requirements, whatever they are. We can ensure that we enforce, what steps a change goes through, who approves it, what documentation is required, and the key systems that it touches. So that, you set the standard when Rev-Trac is installed, and then from then on, every single change has to follow that process. So it is automated and it is enforced. So enforcement is a key concept with Rev-Trac, and the key aspect here is that every single transport is controlled from the moment it's created in development. I'm going to show a demo of this in a short moment, but that is a critical part of Rev-Trac and a way that we can enforce and guarantee compliance through this governance. So let me show that in a short moment. Rev-Trac can ensure that no change progresses unless all of the required testing and approvals are met. This does include segregation of duties or traceability requirements from a documentation perspective. We can enforce those as well and ensure that in order for a change to get to production, it's got to meet those requirements. Rev-Trac isn't just ABAP; it does, with our ability to handle Java or C++ or BTP changes. We can ensure that compliance isn't sidestepped, as well as integrating with third-party tools through REST APIs. We like to say that Rev-Trac is an orchestration platform, so we can integrate with tools like ServiceNow, with Jira, Tosca, LiveCompare, all the best-of-breed tools that we see in the market, and you essentially cannot bypass them. We do ensure that the ROI of those tools is achieved because they are being used whenever they are required by, as indicated by the business. So, and of course, we do have that full audit trail and everything is documented, as we'll get to in a short moment as well. So the key aspect here is that it is all automated, but then also governance is embedded in every single change. So I will show that in a short moment, but one other, I guess, in that configuration and that initial engagement when Rev-Trac is installed, we like to talk about compliance by design. So the key, I guess, one of the great, or one of the ways this is possible is through the Rev-Trac request. So the Rev-Trac request is essentially the handler or the way that Rev-Trac does ensure that all of these tools are integrated and every single bit of documentation is collated and the transport does follow that approved process. It is essentially the container for all of that important information. So whether a change starts in Jira or in ServiceNow, Rev-Trac can intercept it and enforce the correct process, which of course means no rogue transports, no undocumented changes, and no bypassing of approvals. I will show this in a short moment, as well as some of our integrations, but quickly just also talk about some of our reporting as well before we get into it. So we will take a look at Rev-Trac's workflow tab, which shows our digital audit trail that is automatically collated and audit ready. So no need to chase down emails or spreadsheets to prove what happened. Rev-Trac shows everything in detailed and rich migration and approval reports as well. So everything's centralized. They're right there for auditors from external auditors, but also internal governance teams. They can trace changes right from when it was realized or when it was generated, all the way to when it was pushed to production. So that full end-to-end traceability is all automatically collated and available out of Rev-Trac. So this, of course, does dramatically reduce audit effort. IT teams, like I said, they don't have to sift through emails, or they don't have to be pulled off projects because to do these things. It's all available, and it's accurate, and it's all right there, ready for that for when that time comes. So let me talk now, or let me rather show how we can do this, and let me show some examples of where this is beneficial. So I might stop sharing this screen, and I might start sharing my other screen. Examples of Rev-Trac, and we're going to walk through how we can make some of these things a possibility. So for those unfamiliar with this version of Rev-Trac, this is Rev-Trac's web browser version. We call it the web core. And what I'm going to show now is our workflow, our dynamic workflow generation, we'll call it. So for a change, a Rev-Trac request will be created. That might be the first starting point. A transport might be created, which then generates a Rev-Trac request. Whatever way that a Rev-Trac request is created, even if it's a third-party tool, the project and request type is what governs the change. So let me explain that in more detail. So let's go ahead. I'm going to create a few changes, actually. Let me just log back in very quickly. Don't look at my password. We are going to create a handful of changes. So let's say, for example, we're just creating a supply chain change here. If I wanted to, for example, just see, let's treat this like a standard Rev-Trac request. We're just going to keep things nice and simple. This might just be a slight enhancement or something of the like. Let's go and create a support change, and let's just make sure that let's make it aligned with the basic type. So whenever a change is created in Rev-Trac, this track and type is what governs the workflow. When I go ahead and hit save, we can see that the workflow at the top of the screen is what is generated, and this is the process that this change has to follow. So this is very simple. As we can see, we have our change that starts in the status of new. When we add a transport, it moves to in progress, and then we're simply migrating it to the QA systems. We're completing some user testing, and then we're migrating it to production. You can see it in this workflow tab here, but when we add a transport to this Rev-Trac request, that is the process it has to follow. It cannot bypass any of those steps. This is pre-configured when Rev-Trac is set up. That is the important part there. What about if a change requires more governance? So let's say, for example, we are changing. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen again. So we are, let's say, for example, a project long-running change. This might be an S/4HANA change while it's being built. For example, if there is a requirement here for more testing or more approvals, we might say, for example, we'll stay in the project in the support track. But if we are making a support global change, for example, here we can see I guess more of an intensive workflow or more of an involved workflow from a requirements perspective. So say, for example, here we have check to ensure that the documentation is all recorded. We have unit testing and a code review step enforced. User testing, we have post-production validation. This is a change where, for whatever reason, there's more of a requirement and more laborious workflow here for, like I said, for a governance and compliance perspective. So this might be, for example, if, like I said, if it's a project change or if it's impacting a finance object. So it might be required to have that more approvals, or it might require some more documentation to explain why this is required. Rev-Trac can enforce that type of workflow as well. But what about, lastly, let me just make one more change, one more Rev-Trac request. Let's say an emergency change. So if on the flip side, if we do have a change that is it needs to be delivered to production ASAP for whatever reason, we are going to make a support global change again. However, in this instance, let's put it as the class of emergency. Here we hit save and we generate this workflow, which does fast track some of these steps. after an emergency business approval is captured, but then it still does, it does still have to go through some documentation and testing steps towards the back end of this change, but we can enforce that this change does bypass some of those critical steps, moves it towards the end if that emergency business approval is collated from the start. So that concept of the dynamic workflow is an important part of Rev-Trac, because we can say that, depending on the type of change or what systems it impacts, we can make a different workflow, different processes, very dynamic based on the requirement of that change. So that is one thing that I wanted to briefly show. I will stop sharing my screen and just get back to the presentation for one moment, because I do want to show one more thing on Rev-Trac, which I'll just restart my presentation here. We'll get back to the slide that we were on, because I do want to talk more about some of the actual, I guess you'd call it, the compliance requirements, first and foremost being segregation of duties. I'll get straight to it. So with Rev-Trac, we can enforce role-based approvals, which, from our customers and from our prospects, I guess you'd call it, that is one of the most frequently asked questions. Can you enforce segregation of duties? Very, very important for a lot of compliance requirements. Essentially, this basically means that, developers can't approve their own changes to production, or, say, for example, if the business has a requirement that a change advisory board has to approve a change to be moved before it gets moved to production, Rev-Trac can enforce that. So on the right, we do have some different roles and some examples. In the bottom right-hand corner, we can see our amazing Rev-Trac administrators, but Rev-Trac can enforce that only certain people can do certain things, which of course, is fantastic from that compliance perspective. But we also do want to enable users when possible. So say, for example, a developer can, sell if they can do their own unit testing, or they can themselves migrate a change to quality, that does fast track the change, but it also does it in a compliant and secure way. So this does, support a variety of regulatory frameworks, like I mentioned, Sarbanes-Oxley or the FDA requirement there. We can enforce that process, and segregation of duties, like I said, is very important. And we can capture all of that in a complete audit trail. So let me show you an example of how we can do that. And I'm going to show this. I might jump to my Cloud ALM demo to show this in action. I'm just conscious of our time. So let me stop sharing this screen, and I'll start sharing a different screen, because we're going to show a integration that we are continuing to work on, which is very exciting. Particularly as organizations, have to move on to a tool like SAP Cloud ALM. So let me show this here. So for those unfamiliar with Cloud ALM, we are going to start our change in this environment. A Cloud ALM change ticket, or a way that changes are migrated to production in Cloud ALM, can be through what is called a feature, which is the change ticket. In this example, we are going to start our change from the feature here in Rev-Trac. I might just go to this different project here. But what we are going to show here is that separation of duties in a specific example. So let's say, for example, we are making here a finance change. I'm going to firstly just say SOD example. And what I'm also going to do, I am also going to add a link to this feature, just to show another cool thing that Rev-Trac can do. I'm going to add, let's imagine I'm going to add some documentation here. I want to add a specification sheet. I'm going to add a specification sheet, if I can spell it. And I'm sure that this wouldn't be the case, but I'm just going to type in Google's link here. But this is just an example of a link that we are going to add to our feature, which may take the form of a specification sheet. So let me go ahead and create this feature. What we're going to do here is that we are going to treat the feature as our traceable item. This is from a business visibility perspective. The business might have a requirement that a feature does have to be created for every single change. However, we do want to use Rev-Trac for some of those compliance requirements and for that governance automation. So I've just moved our feature to the status of in implementation. I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh, because that is going to kick off our integration here. and we are going to scroll down and we are going to see that in one moment. Let me hit refresh one more time. Here we are going to see that Cloud ALM does create a Rev-Trac request here. And the reason that's important is because Rev-Trac is going to be the tool that is going to handle our governance and our compliance automation here in an audit-ready way. So we have created a new Rev-Trac request here. It does have that title. And if we head to the references tab, it does bring along our specification sheet. This, of course, would be a proper documentation link here, but it does bring that across to Rev-Trac as well. So there's that information centralization, full visibility, all within this one central source of truth here. So as an example of a step that we can add here, I'm going to check off this specification check step here because say, for example, here is where we can enforce the addition of a specification sheet to a change before we progress it. If this specification link didn't exist, this approval step couldn't happen. However, because I've checked that the link is there, I can mark off, one moment, I might just have to update myself as the owner of this change. I can then now mark that this specification check has been viewed and has been applied to this change request. So I'm going to sign and approve it. This is, like I say, a digital signature. I'll show you this in a short moment. And it is all recorded in an audit log. Now, what I'm going to do, I do have a separate screen here. I am just going to add a transport to this request because I'd like to show some segregation of duties in practice. So let me just go ahead and do this on my other device. You'll see that the step that I'm going to walk through is this code review step. I'm going to show how Rev-Trac can enforce that and the implications from the perspective of myself, I guess, as the developer. So let me go ahead and create a transport for this change 2434. I'll show what I'm doing here on this screen in a short moment. But on my screen here, I have just created a transport. If I head to the technical tab, I can hit refresh and see that I've just added this transport ending 998. So this is a change to our finance system. So segregation of duties and additional testing is required. I'm going to say that I've completed this testing. Fantastic. Now, the segregation of duties step here, which is the peer review or the code review step, I, as the creator of this change and as the owner of this change, if I attempt to click this code review step, I cannot do that. I can click it, but it will not let me perform this step because a manager has to approve my code and the manager has to sign off on this step. So Rev-Trac can enforce that and essentially gate this approval to say that only a certain person with a certain role can do this. So what I'm going to do, so of course, the person who is required to do this, as we can see, is either my friends Alex or Lance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just send a quick note to my colleague Lance to hopefully approve this nice and quickly. I'm actually going to do it on my phone here in one moment, but we can see how there is this segregation of duties. Another cool thing about Rev-Trac is that you can approve changes on your phone, which is really cool. Let me just log in. I am going to approve this change on behalf of Lance. I'm going to sign and approve it. I've just done it on my phone. Pretty cool. Let me go ahead and hit refresh here. You'll see that the code review step will move to green, which means that someone else has completed this code review step. And I can head to the workflow tab to see this in action. So the workflow tab is our digital audit trail. It does show every single step. It shows when it was done and who approved it. In particular here, we head to the code review step. This was completed by Lance Testing, who is a manager. So now that this step has been received, I can go ahead and migrate this change to our quality system. So I'm going to hit sign and approve. Another quick little cool feature here is that Rev-Trac does automatically migrate changes and it queues the steps in the background. And we do also auto approve changes if we do have successful return codes. So there's no need for that manual intervention. I'm going to hit refresh here. We can see that this in QAS step was approved automatically by Rev-Trac's auto MIG because we did receive those return codes we did receive good return codes. So that's an example of how we can enforce separation of duties. And I did want to show one additional quick example of this in another Rev-Trac request here. So let's put Cloud ALM to the side for the moment. Let me show how we can make this a reality in ServiceNow. So I am in my others in a different system here. So let me just see if I need to log back in. No, I don't. So let's jump across now. Let's imagine that we have a requirement that for a production approval, a change advisory board has to approve that step in ServiceNow. So in this example, we have change 3780, and it has a transport associated with it ending 937. And I head to the workflow tab and I can see all the steps so far. I can see that we've added a transport, we've run some safety checks, we've migrated to our quality system, and it is currently in QA. Now, like I said, we are going to need to push this to production. But before we do that, we need to get approval from the change advisory board in ServiceNow. So through our integration, I am going to here create a ServiceNow change request automatically. This is done through our bidirectional integration. If I head to the ServiceNow tab and I'm going to hit refresh, this change was actually generated from an incident. You can see the incident number there. But we can also now see this new change request number that has just been created. And if I head to the references tab, we can see a link that will take me to ServiceNow, which is where I can see the change request. So as we can see in a short moment, this is the change request. I'm going to just briefly just show that, say for example, I'm going to mark the user testing step as complete before we do this production approval. Let's head back to ServiceNow, and I'm going to hit refresh. And we can see through our integration that the Rev-Trac status, for example, is user testing complete. I can see the Rev-Trac request number. I can see the description. So there is a link to Rev-Trac as well, so that the change advisory board team can go to Rev-Trac if they need to find additional information. So let me show you what would happen, for example, if I were to try to mark this status as approved in Rev-Trac. Again, it will not let me. We've set a requirement that this ready for production deployment step has to be done before the migrate to production step. However, it is not in the right status. That approval has not been given in ServiceNow, so we cannot progress this change. So let me go ahead and I will give this production approval. I'm going to mark the approval as production approval. I'm going to hit update, and it's going to take a short moment. And then back in Rev-Trac, I can hit refresh, and I can see that ready for production deployment step has been approved. I can head to the workflow tab to say that it was done by ServiceNow. And from a Rev-Trac perspective, I now can migrate this change to production. So let me go ahead and do that. And we can see here, when I hit approve, we can migrate this change to production because we have obtained that approval. And that is, of course, fully auditable. It's fully logged, both in Rev-Trac and ServiceNow. Rev-Trac, in this instance, can be the centralized source of truth, but that is all done through our integration. Now, I am just conscious of time. I know it's approaching 6:45, so what I might do is just stop sharing my screen. I might head to, say for example, the chat and the Q&A and see if we do have any questions, and invite some questions from the floor. Alternatively, I can show one additional demo if the team would like. I'm just conscious of the timing of this webinar. Like I said, the Q&A is open. What I might do while that's happening, I'll invite people to add some questions if they please. I will show this last little demo that I did want to show. So we talked about enforcement, and we talked about Rev-Trac's ability to ensure that every single change does follow, is associated with a Rev-Trac request. So if you'd like to see that in action, to be honest, everybody, I tried to, throw that together, hoping, it could work for the first time on this webinar. Maybe not a great idea, but I guess in summary, let's wrap up some of the core messages. First of all, being that the goal is to automate what you can and embed governance in order to reduce risk, reduce audit effort and risk as well. So that is possible by Rev-Trac, and we invite those that either do not have Rev-Trac or would like to learn more to get in touch with the team to explore this, in a demonstration, or explore this in more detail if you have more questions. But the key here is that Rev-Trac can automate and enforce your change management process. It ensures that every single change is documented, approved, traceable, and aligned with your internal policies or external compliance regulations, requirements rather. When it comes time to audit, when it does come to audit time, that no more scrambling, no more, chasing emails or reconstructing change histories manually. Everything is automated and everything is there in a complete and a clean record. So they can fully see, who did what, when they did it, and why they did it at the touch of a button, fully automated and available via Rev-Trac. So like I said, Rev-Trac, we consider ourselves an orchestration engine. We consider ourselves a compliance engine. We do make all of those things easier. So in closing, I'd like to say that, if you're an organization that would like to learn more about faster, cleaner audits and confident compliance, then absolutely get in touch with Rev-Trac to learn more. So I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. I hope you've taken something from it. And the recording will be available for those who request it if you'd like. So you can, of course, watch this again and revisit some of the key points and get in touch with us if you have any more questions. So we'll wrap it up there. I would like to thank everyone for attending one more time and wish everyone the best. Thank you very much.